Hello, my name is Gay Evans. Thank you so much for choosing this 10-minute talk on Rebecca and a common lodging house. Let me share my screen and we can get started. Okay, I'm going to make myself a little bit bigger. Okay. Most of my talks have a connection to an ancestor. This one doesn't. I was looking for a client for one of their ancestors, 4 Wright Street, Derby. And I looked on the 1911, 1921 census and didn't find them. But I found Rebecca and her husband. And here they are. They're lodgers. He's 51, she's 41. But what struck me more than anything else, and if you haven't looked at the 1911 census, it shows how long somebody's been married and how many children, and then those alive and died. And this is Rebecca, 17 years married, 16 children, 5 alive, and 11 have died. I've never seen statistics like that. I've seen the 16 children possibly, not in such a short time, but I've never seen that level of death. That took me by surprise, and I immediately warmed to Rebecca and the life that she may have had. But I wasn't expecting to find quite so much on her. So here she is. She's in a lodging house with her husband, with 4 of her surviving children. And there is a deputy and an assistant deputy of a common lodging house. There are 63 people sharing this space. I had no clue what a common lodging house was. I'd not come across that before. So I thought, right, I need to do some research. And this is a work in progress. I'm still working on this. But the secret world of the Victorian lodging house, I'm a couple of chapters in, it's very descriptive. I had no idea. I just didn't realize our ancestors, some of our ancestors, were living in such dire conditions with no sunlight. Some were living in cellars because it was cheaper, no sanitation, no fresh water. Just sounds terrible. Supposedly, it's a step up from the workhouse. I'm not quite so sure. But it was supposedly as well an environment that was full of criminals, beggars, drifters, prostitutes, homeless, etc. So, and they are, as it says here in this description, scratching a living. But in the book, it talks about these courtyards, and we'll look at that in a moment. As I say, it is still a work in progress for me. And I looked at this, I'm putting into Excel all of the 63 occupiers of that lodging house. And this is, I've put in occupation order. And as you can see here, they're colliers, hawkers, labourers, and really earning probably the lowest of the low wage, and it would not necessarily be regular work. And here's Wright Street, pretty much in the centre of Derby. These areas have now been cleared, but as you can see, something I hadn't seen before is Court 1, Court 2, Court 3, and they're built very close together. And it was a cheap way of building, and you crammed all these people in. So there's no gardens, there's no people getting much light. The buildings are overshadowing those courtyards. And as I said before, sanitation was a real problem. And then I looked at some of the deaths for Rebecca and John's children. And as you can see here, they're dying at a very young age. And all of these give the address of Wright Street. Different numbers, different courts, but they're all in a similar position in the living environment. So marasmus is a malnutrition, and that leads on to death if that's not rectified. And you can see pneumonia, premature, there's want of breast milk, because I'm sure Rebecca will have been, with all those pregnancies and living conditions, not in the best of health herself. But what about Rebecca? What I was shocked to see and delighted to see in a way was that Rebecca features in quite a few court cases as a witness. And it just gives you a flavor of what she's living around. And you see there's a theft from a lodging house, and she's saying she resides there and she saw the prisoners in the prosecutor's house handing out the articles. That's in July 1904. In August 1904, she's witness to a stabbing affray in Wright Street. And the description is amazing. Not fatal. It talks about 3 female witnesses here failing to appear. I don't know if Rebecca is one of them. But she says here, she was sitting on the steps at the bottom of the street on the evening in question. She saw a prisoner lying on the ground, cutting up some tobacco, no doubt with a penknife. The next bit, I can picture it in my mind's eye. Potter came up, got hold of Morley's necktie and said, "We've come from Nottingham to put you through it for whatever reason. Maybe he's not paid a bill. I don't know." But they're saying there's no time to shut the knife that he was cutting his tobacco with, and it's an accidental stabbing. Sadly, then she witnesses, she's now the deputy of Hitchman's lodging house. She's the wife of the deputy. And she is giving evidence. She identifies a person who's lived there for 9 years. And she's come home. This person has come home and is drunk. And Rebecca helps her up the stairs to her room, but the door is locked. So she goes downstairs to get another key. And that's when this lady falls down the stairs and is fatally injured. So she's again, that's 1910. Then there's a manslaughter charge, and she is amazingly a witness to that. I think she must have spent most of her time outside on the street somewhere. And on that, I'm not casting any aspersions as to her profession. But this is very much like the one punch charge. Now, he's pushed this gentleman, and she's saying there, pushed his head hitting the floor. It was somebody hitting the chest by Lank, so she obviously knew him, and she went after him with a poker. What she was quite doing with a poker, quite to hand, I'm not quite sure. And he said that if she came up to him, he would do the same to her. That's in 1921. Then in 1934, she accuses Thomas Millard of assaulting her. And she's now at Bridgegate, but these are very similar living conditions on Bridgegate as it was on Wright Street. And she's saying that she was just talking to Millard's mother-in-law when he came up and struck her between the eyes. There's no nothing in the paper to say why that happened. He is fined 10 shillings and costs were imposed. So whether he thought she was talking to his mother-in-law about him, we don't know. And then we've got her, finally, the final little bit I can find of her being fined for not having a dog license. And it's keeping dogs in the plural. And I'm sure they were a comfort to her, those dogs, and kept her feeling safe after her husband died. And that's in 1939. But sometimes people, when you're doing any research, just leap out at you. Rebecca certainly did. I'm still working on this, as I say, but the newspapers, I never expected to find her being a witness so many times. So it just adds the environment that she's living in. It tells that tale of the danger she's in. Any questions at all, please email me. Thank you so much for listening.